La lectura del libro La máquina del tiempo, del escritor H. G. Wells, cautivó de tal manera al físico Ron Mallett que ha dedicado gran parte de su vida al estudio de la posibilidad de crear una máquina del tiempo. Las leyes de la física mencionan que es posible hacerlo, gracias a que el espacio-tiempo es una cuarta dimensión, según lo escrito por Albert Einstein. Suena como ciencia ficción, pero los humanos hemos estado analizando las posibilidades de viajar a través del tiempo, pasado y futuro, desde que la tecnología avanzó a grandes pasos en el siglo XX. El científico Ron Mallett habla sobre la posibilidad de la máquina del tiempo. Videos interesantes vía YouTube. El viaje a través del tiempo se lograría si se curvara la dimensión y se crea un puente entre los dos puntos que se busca unir. Un agujero de gusano sería la mejor manera en que se viajará a través del espacio-tiempo, logrando así el sueño de muchos científicos, viajar tanto al pasado como al futuro. La energía oscura se necesitaría para poder crear el agujero de gusano, pero es algo muy difícil de realizar y quizás el más cercano se encuentre a años luz del planeta Tierra. Un agujero de gusano. Foto, Taringa. Ron Mallett menciona que el plan para la máquina del tiempo se le ocurrió tras una lectura que realizó de los escritos de Einstein. Con un láser que genera un haz circular, se curvaría el espacio y como están íntimamente conectados, también el tiempo lo haría. Con una máquina así, Ron Mallett podría visitar a su padre, quien murió de un ataque al corazón cuando él tenía 10 años de edad. Podría interesarte. Starbucks le dará 10 millones a quien le haga un vaso más ecológico. Playas bioluminiscentes, un fenómeno natural que también se puede ver en México. Descubren especie de avispa que al picar inyecta sus huevecillos en el cuerpo. Gerardo VM.
The term scientific romance was one that attached itself in particular to the works of Jules Verne and H. G. Wells, seen by many as the two founding fathers of science fiction. In fact, it is the use of this term that so often leads academics to separate these writers, and even the likes of Mark Twain and Edgar Allan Poe, from the term science fiction. Ask anyone what kind of books Jules Verne and H. G. Wells are notable for, and they will tell you that they were science fiction writers. Verne and later Wells were writing at a time when the advances of science and technology were becoming much more apparent to their respective societies, and their ability to speculate on such advances greatly informed their works, more so than any other writers before them. Jules Verne's output over his long literary career included a number of important science fiction novels, such as Voyage au centre de la Terre, translated as Journey to the Centre of the Earth, 20 000 lieues sur la mer, translated as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, De la Terre à la Lune, translated as From the Earth to the Moon, and its sequel, Autour de la Lune, translated as Around the Moon, to name but a few. Verne's works were often poorly translated into English, but nonetheless his stories were immensely popular at the time. He is most famous for his tales featuring extraordinary journeys, also known as voyages extraordinaires. Although not all of these would fall into the category of science fiction, they are on the whole what we call scientific romances. Verne's particular style within the science fiction tradition was that his novels featured heavily the technologies of his day, and it was with a sense of verisimilitude towards these technologies that herein lay the most notable elements of science fiction in his work. He, however, often failed to complement this with the fantastical lands and beasts that populate his novels. His intent to base his work on sound scientific principles of the time meant that he seldom extrapolated or speculated on these technologies or the science behind them, which coincidentally led him to heavily criticise the works of Wells for that very same reason. I make use of physics. He invents. I go to the moon in a cannonball, discharged from a cannon. Here there is no invention. He goes to Mars in an airship which he constructs of a material which does away with the law of gravitation. Ah, ça, c'est très joli, cried Monsieur Verne in an animated way. But show me this metal. Let him produce it. It is with H.G. Wells, however, that we can see perhaps the most outstanding contribution and influence to the genre of science fiction, and who is best suited to the title of Father of Science Fiction above the likes of Lucian, Verne, and Gernsback. In fact, Wells's influence on science fiction is probably greater than any other writer, having himself become an oft-used character that appears in many science fiction novels and films. Wells's science fiction is a marked contrast to that of Jules Verne, most notably in the degree to which he is prepared to speculate on both the nature of humanity and its future, and the technological and scientific advances which he extrapolated with remarkable accuracy. Wells's science fiction is an example of first-class prediction, using speculation and extrapolation, but this has sometimes mistakenly led it to be seen as prophetic. Within his own lifetime, Wells would come to see many of his predictions and speculations come true, including air-based warfare, the tank, and ultimately the atomic bomb, which he would live to see come into horrifying reality before his death in 1946. His predictions were not just of martial developments, as we see in the shape of things to come, which included ideas such as air conditioning and mass media television broadcasts. The War of the Worlds, published in 1898, based around the concepts of the Thames Valley disaster novels and the plethora of invasion books which were popular in the late 19th century, has become one of the most enduring and adaptable of science fiction works, being continuously remade to suit the times. Wells's take on this style of novel was to make his invaders aliens from Mars, and in an adept stroke, through his interest in the concepts of social Darwinism, actually shows the Martians to be examples of what humanity may become a million or so years down the road. The different versions of War of the Worlds include Orson Welles' Mercury Theatre production in 1938, which became notorious as the broadcast that terrified America, while different movie incarnations have included the George Pal-produced 1953 version, which won an Oscar for special effects, the 1996 film Independence Day, where the virus that destroys the aliens is updated to a computer virus, and the recent Steven Spielberg version in 2005. The 1978 musical version by Jeff Wayne is also currently enjoying a popular resurgence at the moment, and shows both the popularity and adaptability of this work over the last 100 years. Brian Aldiss saw Wells as very much set apart from not only those who came before him, but also those who would come after, and describes his virtues as a writer as follows. The virtues which lift Wells above his successors and above Verne are threefold. Firstly, he inherited something of the inquiring spirit of Swift, and science is, when all's said, a matter of inquiry. From this spring the other two virtues, Wells's ability to see clearly the world as it is, for without such an ability it is impossible to visualize any other world very clearly, and his lifelong avoidance of drawing lead characters with whom readers will uncritically identify, and thus be lulled into acceptance of whatever is offered. Darko Suvin sees Wells in a slightly different light, primarily in his attitude to science and technology as a two-edged sword. To Suvin, Wells's main strength was that he was able to look away from the optimistic possible futures of humanity and show that science was indifferent to the needs of mankind, being able to encompass its destruction as well as its salvation. This is very much true of Wells, who could see the myriad possibilities facing humanity as it left the 19th century and emerged into the coming terrors that the first half of the 20th century would provide. Science is the true demonic master of all the sorcerers' apprentices in Wells, who have, like Frankenstein or certain folk-tale characters, revealed and brought about destructive powers and monsters. From Time Traveller through Moreau and Griffin to Cavor, the prime character of his science fiction is the scientist adventurer as searcher for the new, disregarding common sense and received opinion. Though powerful, since it brings about the future, science is a hard master. Like Moreau, it is indifferent to human suffering. Like the Martians, it explodes the 19th century optimistic pretensions, liberal or socialist, of lording over the universe. In that sense, Wells's The War of the Worlds is also an indictment against the genocidal actions of the British Empire against the people of Tasmania. The helplessness that the locals feel against the invaders was meant to mirror the same helplessness that the Aboriginal people felt against the overwhelming power of the might of Britain. In The Time Machine, an Invention, published in 1895, Wells provides us with two possible outcomes for humanity's evolution, much in the manner of the evolved Martians, and he illustrates these evolutionary possibilities in The Subterranean Morlocks and The Sheep-like Eloi, neither of which would seem particularly appealing in the sense of progress. Wells's novels are now regarded as classics, whether they are of ordinary fiction, scientific romance, or science fiction. His influence on the emerging American magazine market would be enormous, as too were the likes of Verne, Lovecraft, and Poe. But his work also informed the quiet British science fiction tradition, which would carry on throughout the American Golden Age. With his novel The First Men in the Moon, published in 1901, which Verne was so annoyed with, Wells acknowledged the influence of the Lucianic tradition upon his work, doing so by providing the first paragraph of Icaromenopus as an epigraph to this novel. The tradition carried forward from the original Lucianic satire had now reached the 20th century, and whether science fiction or not, had inspired the vast amount of writers who had dabbled in the beginnings of the genre or within the realms of its honourable ancestors. Without Wells, it is unlikely that we would have seen the arrival of such works as Huxley's Brave New World, Yevgeny Zamyatin's We, Olaf Stapleton's Last and First Men, and Star Maker, and even Orwell's 1984. But without Lucian, we may never have seen the science fiction works of any of these authors' imaginations. In the wake of Wells and his contemporaries, British science fiction would plod quietly along through the war years, penned by those who were generally not seen as science fiction writers. Rather, they would be viewed as respectable writers dabbling in this strange fantastical genre. In Britain, science fiction would begin to emerge quietly in the early 50s, before turning against the American tide, which would dominate the genre for over 30 years.
Muchos lo consideramos aquel concepto que le da duración a las cosas sujetas a mudanza. Pocos se han detenido a maravillarse con lo que se dice es una simple magnitud física que permite ordenar la secuencia de los sucesos. Hablamos de hombres que han puesto en tela de juicio el estudio de lo que parece ser una invención para controlar nuestra realidad. Cronos, por ejemplo, es la personificación del tiempo que ha sido un dios incorpóreo del universo. Nos muestra la tendencia de que uno parte del otro. Es entonces cuando deja a la vista que las personas que tienen ese conocimiento de sucesos que aún no son perceptibles en estos parámetros, sean mensajeros enviados por Dios, a los que comúnmente llamamos profetas. Desde pequeños se nos habla de los grandes como Ezequiel, Daniel, Jeremías e Isaías, pero quienes se han encontrado con un común denominador son los escritores contemporáneos. Tal vez el espectador se sienta ofendido cuando escuche que dejaré en el aire nombres como Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, Julio Verne, Robert Heinlein, Philip K. Dick, William Gibson e incluso la misma Mary Shelley. Mi nombre es Humberto y en esta ocasión vamos a rebobinar en el profeta de la ciencia ficción, H.G. Wells. Una buena historia nos abre las puertas de la imaginación a puntos que no conocemos y escenarios que tal vez no existen, pero pueden ser posibles. Hace un siglo y medio nació un hombre llamado Herbert George Wells, quien en su juventud se rompió la tibia, hecho que aplaudimos en contadas ocasiones. Pues ¿qué sería de esas largas horas en cama sin tanta lectura? Es sin duda una interrogante que nos hubiésemos tenido que hacer. ¿Tendríamos acaso el escritor, el narrador, el analista político que hoy consideramos profeta? Es este británico amigo, este hermano, quien tocó por primera vez la posibilidad de la máquina que nos marcaría el viajar en el tiempo. Muchos pensarán que es imposible la construcción de este aparato. Sin embargo, Wells no solo escribió de armatostes y marcianos. En 1933, 6 años antes del inicio de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, Wells previó el estallido de una larga guerra en Europa Oriental que arrastraría a otras naciones en su libro Esquema de los tiempos futuros. Sé que el público es conocedor y refutarán que él no fue el único en predecir este conflicto global durante los volátiles años 30. Pero sus descripciones, los bombardeos, el temor de los ataques con gas, fueron confirmados por la realidad. Aunque Robert Crowley fue el primero en imaginarse la energía atómica y la bomba en The Clock of Doom de 1895, Wells acuñó el término bomba atómica en El mundo se libera de 1914, en el que señaló que podían explotar continuamente usando el poder de la radioactividad. El físico Leo Szilard le dio el crédito a H.G. Wells por la idea de la reacción en cadena que se desarrolló en 1933. Más tarde, Szilard trabajó en el proyecto Manhattan, que produjo la bomba atómica. Wells también anticipó el problema de la proliferación, advirtiendo que un gobierno global era la única manera de impedir que las naciones se destruyeran entre ellas con armas nucleares. ¿Recuerdas también el nuevo orden mundial? Este concepto ya lo manejaba H.G. Wells. Además predijo conflictos biológicos en la guerra de los mundos. Muchos me han criticado por ser un asiduo fan de este libro. No tienen idea de que esos dos actos se dividen también en profecías. Quienes han leído sus páginas llenas de intriga conocerán el Heat Ray, que hace referencia al rayo láser. Disparaba energía tan poderosa que prendía fuego en la piel e incineraba los edificios. ¿Acaso no es esto ya posible? Esta tecnología aparece en manos de las hordas de marcianos que aterrizaban en un barrio londinense a finales del siglo XIX. Por otro lado, hablemos de su predicción de la llegada a la Luna, que al igual que Verne, desató una polémica impresionante en su tiempo. Los primeros hombres en la Luna, el título de su novela de 1901 lo dice todo. Quizás no es cierto que el satélite de la Tierra esté habitado por la civilización subterránea de selenitas, pero la aventura lunar de Mr. Bedford y el Dr. Cable anticipó el alunizaje del Apolo 11 en 1969.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Embriones e híbridos interespecies conocidos como quimeras hoy en día son rutinariamente creados para la investigación médica, solo que ahora se hace en laboratorios en lugar de mesas de operaciones, como lo dijo Wells. En Cuando el dormido despierte de 1899, esta es la primera descripción de una puerta automática. Es cierto que todavía estamos esperando los autos voladores y que las visiones como los viajes interplanetarios de Wells nos ponen tela de juicio todas estas cosas. Sin embargo, ha habido un progreso. Llegamos a la Luna. Nuestras ondas espaciales viajaban cada vez más lejos. No resultaron ser tan desatinados después de todo. Porque él es un profeta de la ciencia ficción. Espero que esta información sea de tu agrado y compartas el video. Además, no olvides suscribirte y pasarte también por el canal de mi amiga Hailey, que tiene una voz hermosa y te va a encantar su material.